petty. I know it's petty, but it's petty. Hey, man, let me go on and get into the content without being too extra. But you know it's petty. I just got to say that to start. Since you know it's going to be petty, let's go on and get into it. The most difficult part about content creation, in many cases, is just knowing where to start. Oftentimes, it's also knowing where to call it quits. And so, I want to bring you behind the scenes of what it takes, but also keep on topic with what Plot Twist intends to create. See, not only do we have a platform where conversations can happen, whether we like the outcome or not, I for one understand what it feels like to have that voice taken away. And I can't handle everybody's issues. I tell you, there's some people who are made and built better for dealing with other people's drama. And that's why they encourage themselves to have sisterhoods or somebody that they can talk to. We can look across that table from its ideological constructs that we know, a political lens. And the common conversation is that Black women vote according to a set of political blue ticket standards. What ends up happening then is a political twist. When you do have Black voices that emerge, only because first they were willing to sit at that table. Having white allies like Jane Elliott can help bring more Black women to said table. But once they have captivated an audience, well, I would hope that they have the Paycheck Protection Program's average loan forgiveness of $72,500. The Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP loan, we don't know what the average loan request was, but the loan forgiveness data has been published. Top PPP loan alternatives for getting a business loan today. Well, that was published to Newsweek. And it says that the committee found 97% of PPP loans were used to help fund payroll. And that makes me scratch my head, being the person who was on the call with the White House, and I streamed it live. And they were talking about the Black community not taking full advantage of the PPP loans, and even the Small Business Association not being able to reach out to Black women and minority entrepreneurs. But we want political statements, right? So let's turn Kanye West into a prop. The Black men you give props that like being used as props. Political statement, yay. Well, he humbles himself to Candace Owens rather than seeing himself as the one. And I guess that's his issue. But it does make her a plot twist. There have been many of ways of looking at what happens next once diverse talent is at the table. And so analyzing it from the lens of a plot twist, it's, well, their views may not align always with PC culture. And according to Jane Elliott, the white woman who teaches white women how to be allies to Black women in corporate America, That's a good thing. And so the position that Black women having a voice at the table and that it not always conforming to the traditional sense of a down ballot Democrat, it leaves them wondering, well, what is she actually saying? The trifecta was broken at one point in time because when the message was tested in their own words, the loyalty or the ability to stand committed and firm, well, one didn't like said pushback and felt attacked, while the other felt like family. And that may be a paradigm for some people to understand. Why, if somebody finally pushes back, that's where it feels like, okay, now you're making some progress. But in corporate America, because there was only kiss-ass Black folks there, they had to open up the table for more diverse talent than men who could co-opt the Black experience, such as Africans and African Americans. Who would get the most resistance for having a voice at the table would be the Black woman. Who would get the most acceptance? Well, of course, it's Jane Elliott. Because despite Black men making their way to the table and then preserving their right to an income by remaining silent, what we found is that affirmative action was a better benefit once corporate America heard the message and accepted the tax on the hand. The government programs that benefited from that taxation of corporate America, once they listened, well, that still went to white women. And the message that Jane Elliott preached, that Black women having a voice at the table, well, that's still necessary today because, well, Jane Elliott gets the credit if you like political statements made by Kanye. In Black YouTube, we experience plot twists when people say things that are taboo or go against the norm, the customs, the traditions, when they are no longer down ballot Democrat conforming voices that white allies brought to the table. And thus you have the radical conservative as an alternative to making gains for the sex worker space into juvenile spaces. I believe it was a necessary break of the trifecta. I'm sorry that that message was, America is not ready for that. They would more accept Jeffrey Dahmer and white cannibalism than a Black woman given a platform who is now trying to have the conversation open to young Black girls who were molested. But let's not take it that far, because that's the message that rubs conservatives wrong. They hate when they have to use the word rape. And the voice being brought to the table of the Black single mothers is about protection of children. How that message is presented would get the Black mother censored from YouTube. Oh, but the pornocrats that want to show the destruction of the Black body, that can get streamed billions of times. Sex and the perversion of it. 42 minutes and 58 seconds, 3,000 views. That has to be a shadow ban. Are Black men a lost cause? The receipt and the right. Sanji, Irene Yvette, special guest, Nyla says, this is back in the day when there was a who gonna check me boo, attempting to push back, as we know, against the plot twist. Then on the bottom, some additional receipts so that I don't have to be the one saying it time and time again. The color of reparations is not green. Candace Owens on Ahmaud Arbery, is she wrong? Channel memberships, content with no filter. Uplifting Black criminals. Candace Owens on George. Are trans women women? Trigger warning. And they would say the single Black mother who gets married, at this point, I don't believe that the YouTube content creator's personal and private life should have ever been targeted, but that was the, of course, plot twist, let alone the loss of the First Amendment rights for being a mother who asks the question and opens up a platform. Trigger warning advised, may not be for everyone. But the primary goal and her primary audience are Black single mothers discussing protection of children, and she has to take precautions because she knows she will lose her voice and her seat at the table despite which allies advocated for her to be there. And we know this is true because Nyla says, lost her channel. And while the image at first, for me even, creating the plot twist was the shadow ban, we hadn't even got to the censoring yet, or the loss of the First Amendment right. Because the question was whether or not men were supposed to be fighting these battles and not women in the first place. And that if women lose their Second Amendment right or voluntarily don't exercise their Second Amendment right, they ought to at least be able to access their first. And if they can't, then why should we even be there? Plot twist 8. We only get half of the story or a piece of the story, or we get one of the Roman numerals as a way of evaluating whether or not a person's entire resume should be dismissed. And in today's society, Mark Zuckerberg is responsible. By plot twist 9, I thought people would understand that bringing forth the data does not help people. The data then turns around to being, well, you're too dumb, which is essentially a play on you're too ugly to be at the table, or your nose is too big. You have dominant facial features for a woman. Your genes would most likely resemble your grandparent, not your mitochondrial DNA, but that of your grandfather. And you got big eyes the black woman's full lips, you better not have hips. And I think as the older cousin or the younger cousin, shut your dumb ass up went a long way in the household. But saying that in corporate America doesn't have the same receptivity, even though those folks might call you family. They might even call you sis. You may operate in the same space, have the same target demographic, have even predominantly the same message at the end of the day, and both of you will be the target of the black man who was brought to the table before you, who was the main one making the joke about how ugly you are, entertaining everybody else who otherwise would have been an ally. But in plot twist 4, because the nigga thought it was funny, and they loved them a good funny nigga. You said if you don't shut your dumb ass up in corporate America, would got you fired and them promoted, or at least $8 more than you. And I don't care if that was $8 a day or $8 an hour. If it ends in the black woman being censored because the man who told the joke caused all of the supposed allies to laugh, well, who owes the apology to who? I let that shit sink in because people be needing to process this shit. I ain't gonna lie, I be needing to process it, which is why, in order for me to process it, sometimes I have to tune out from everything that I thought be important and tune into some things that I think are important to other people. And while learning how to listen, well, sometimes women talk about women stuff, man. Family talks about family, and sometimes family can only get away with talking to family like that because they are in the backyard. And distance, especially working in a COVID or a remote environment, sometimes blurs the line between professional relationships, and you'll find out that there are some men who will talk to women as if that's not somebody's wife. Swear to God, it pushes black women to entrepreneurship. Despite being the very diverse talent that could really help move America forward, JP Morgan Diamond, whatever his name is, despite becoming the GOAT and doing what no male competitor was doing, is doing, or has done 3 times. Well, they just want to beat up on Candace Owens. She was the one sitting there at the joint subcommittee hearing, confronting violence. But yet, despite her resume and all of her accolades, even in women's spaces, she's just a prop to some. And what she said and what she commanded, not just the media attention, well, that gets lost because, well, her nose is smaller and she doesn't have a wig on. In fact, she's built like a little ass girl. And if you slow that down, it's not appropriate in corporate America to say those things about that system. And if you're not in the backyard, those are the type of statements that while some people who would claim to be allies, they would find this shit hilarious. Well, when I have to rewind my involvement and what I've done for the last 5 years, confronting violence, joint subcommittee hearing. Since then, she got married to a white and became Mrs. Farmer. She still has the Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube as she uses her voice in media. White nationalists, neo-Nazis, and members of the alt-right exchanging insults with counter-protesters on Saturday in Charlottesville, Virginia. Well, that was just the topic. And what was said at the joint subcommittee hearing, well, I guess we don't know. If there is one message I want to communicate, it's simply be free. CandaceOwens.com. Mrs. Farmer spoke towards Section 301 authorization of appropriations funding $2 million for each fiscal year 2020 through 2026 to carry out an act. $1 million authorized to be appropriated for each of such fiscal years for the completion of the joint reports on domestic terrorism and international terrorism under Section 101, and $1 million is authorized to be appropriated for each of such fiscal years. A, in the first such report, data on incidents or attempted incidents of domestic terrorism and international terrorism have occurred in the United States since April 19, 1995, disaggregated by fiscal year, including with respect to each such incident. Four, the potential benefits and risks of implementing such strategies in the United States, including any potential harm to local communities, privacy, civil rights, civil liberties, and safety. Six, online platform. The term online platform means any public-facing website, web application, or digital application, including mobile application, and includes a social network, an ad network, a search engine, or an email service. 7, personally identifiable information. The term personally identifiable information means any information about an individual elicited, collected, stored, or maintained by an agency. Section 302, rules of construction. It's about personal identifiable information, or PII. No report or database created pursuant to this act may contain the personally identifiable information of any person except persons indicted or convicted of a crime with a domestic terrorism or international terrorism, here's the word, nexus. Which is why we're finally in plot twist X. Because so often we're only in the Roman numerals, where the I, or the single individual household, is most important. But the per capita argument gets lost, And what's being done on a federal level gets lost when we only rely on media and what they say. Discourse. No report or database created pursuant to this act may contain the name or other identifiable information of any organization engaged in lawful political or public discourse in the United States protected under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. So when I say protecting Black women's First Amendment rights, I could rewind this, or you could rewind it, but I don't want to have to keep coming back and saying I'm sorry. But it wasn't for the people who claim to be allies to apologize for laughing after they brought in the nigga when they loved them a funny nigga. The nigga make the joke. The nigga has to apologize if he's called out for sexual harassment. White nationalists, neo-Nazis, and members of the alt-right exchange insults with counter-protesters on Saturday in Charlottesville, Virginia was the headline. Candace Owens then became a headline from News One, YouTube, News One, TV Overmind, and FoxNews.com. Today we have Fox Soul, which opens up a platform for folks like Candace Owens. No, Candace Owens has her own platform, and she would go to Fox News. Fox Soul opens up for allies, other Black women who they felt should have a voice at the table. But again, it's for allies. But when they opened up on her, Candace Owens' grandfather speaks out on her behavior. They dox your grandfather, man. Watch Candace Owens' testimony before Congress. The self-hating Candace Owens becomes mother. And then from News One, they say to a Black child, 10 things you didn't know about Candace Owens. And then Candace Owens slams the left for pinning rising violence. And then we'll let them carry on with whatever they thought was important at the time to say about Mrs. Farmer, who was the one who sat down and confronted violence in front of Congress at the joint subcommittee hearing. And that's discourse. And I wanted to talk about the First Amendment, or at least show the receipts that when Black women do get brought to the table, this is what is lost. When the nigga makes the joke, and the joke becomes so funny that at the water cooler for the next fucking year, they remember the nappy-headed hoe joke. And they associate that with every Black woman they encounter, even if they don't see her. Those who claim to be allies can't see her. They see her nose. They see her lips. And they remember that Black man saying, if you don't sit your little ass down. And while they thought that he was just talking to his sister, and that's how Blacks talk to each other, the African American can then be a part of the diversity and inclusion program and say, well, that's a cultural nuance that you all don't understand, even as allies. But her saying, shut your ass up out loud, or even calling him dumb, she would be labeled a bitch. And that is the stigma that is yet to be overcome because of that funny ass nigga and that stupid ass joke. And all of this plot twist is long before you get the voice of the Black woman who's in the room who says that shit wasn't even funny. Candace Owens. And long before the sister who's in the room who says, how do y'all call yourselves allies? And tries to hold the white people who called themselves allies accountable. And thus Jane Elliott becomes the best advocate exposing white privilege. Who they put on a pedestal? Kanye West, or Ye. He's changed his name, and he's mad that the media won't respect his name as Ye. Media is both black and white, and Turning Point USA is more political than media, which is why it has to be about the intersectionality. And she's the woman who went to Congress. Whether she was ready, whether she had her talking points aligned, or whether she even knew where she stood politically, at least she knew what bill to talk about on the political floor and to link it to money to get their attention, since they're all talking to the white men who got everybody a seat at the table in the first place, including said ally. She says, I'm a black conservative because I know my history. I'm a black conservative because I understand that what the left is trying to do is not progressive. It's actually regressive. See, I did the plot twist where I was like, well, here are her mentors, and that was about Thomas Sowell, the master teacher of economics in the black community. And a lot of folks didn't know that. So before I go to anything about what my sister's position is, I would first have to address the black man who ends up being the comedian, because as you look at his legacy and his track record of books, he had a lot to say and no real results, except his own publishing rights, which meant he preserved his intellectual property well. But the black woman is still allowed to be censored, even when they're better at omni-channel social media marketing than the LLCs that would fire them for telling the black man to shut his ass up, and that not being sexual harassment. That's just a terminatable offense. But y'all don't fucking hear me. In the empowerment community, it turns into, well, who could be a better ally? And it only starts turning into who could be a better ally when you have the person who has a legitimate ground to stand on. And you know that it's a legitimate ground to stand on when that message turns you into a prop. I hate that I'm so easily gullible and naive, susceptible to trying to break that uncomfortable silence. And my own personal self-defense mechanism in an uncomfortable environment is humor. And whether I seek white approval or not with what I say, and whether what I say is intended to be offensive or not, it must really fucking suck to have to relate to the black woman who got fired for telling that person to shut up. For being a prop. They could call themselves allies, but if you put them on a jury, well, them and their peers, do you think they're coming to the actual defense of Candace Owens? Or are they just giving her a bigger platform, which in turn makes her even a bigger target for even more internet trolls? And whether she's ready or not, her soul has to be able to absorb every time she logs on. If she has a Google alert for her own name, ping, 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 driving this mother crazy, whether she's married or single or not, whether she chooses to be an advocate for single mothers or for Black women, whether she just wants to fight and defend Candace Owens, the corporations fire her. And I swear to God, it drives Black women to entrepreneurship if they didn't fire her. It drives the woman who's sitting there like, how are they laughing at the joke towards entrepreneurship? Because this happened September 20th, 2019. Police stand watch near the statue of the Confederate General Robert E. Lee in the center of Emancipation Park on Sunday. On a Sunday when people are coming to exercise their civil liberties to protest. Other people said, well, what are you protesting? And when they found out what they were protesting, they said, you're not going to protest this statue. This statue has been erected by the daughters of the Confederates. And so they use their social media platform to say this isn't hate speech. And they're allowed to assemble and galvanize and bring themselves together to the point where if somebody wanted to enact violence and they were saying, man, run them over, they even had the support from some police officers in the international policing community who were saying, just run the fucking protesters over as a form of counter-protest. And so we have to talk about the allies who were supposed to be allies. Because right now it looks like Candace Owens was just a piece of meat for a nigga with one eye. And regardless of what she was talking about, this white man or the white women behind her can never see it from her perspective. I don't care what water they drink, whether it comes from Dasani or whether it comes from Flint or Jackson, Mississippi. She says George Floyd was a horrible human being. Racially targeted police brutality against Black Americans is a myth. Conservative Candace Owens. And the media talks about her wearing a shirt that says White Lives Matter. But Congress never answered her question. And what Democrats typically do is load up on, oh, yes, that's a good program. That sounds like a good initiative. How are you going to fund it? Pointing out that there's already funding for it. Well, make it make sense. They say in our space, Black YouTube, we don't give credit. Make it make sense is actually a plot twist because it's the only way to think of these things when you think of things that somebody said something, somebody didn't give them credit for it, but said it a different way. And then somebody says what they're saying a different way and wants credit for it. Like Kevin Samuels saying, what that nigga say? I don't even know exactly what that nigga said. He just always said it. I got a screenshot of it, but I don't remember it because I wasn't actually the fan. But I could tell you where he got it from. Make it make sense. It's Cynthia G. And that's something she said because she was trying to filter herself. Because her platform started growing so big, some people in her audience were giving her feedback that, hey, I'm at work, motherfucker. But you can't say that to somebody unless you're in the backyard or unless they really a family. Motherfucker got bad connotations. That wasn't ever supposed to have been intended to be funny and slowed down. But people who claim to be allies, they heard motherfucker. And motherfucker, they said, we'll allow it, we'll allow it, we'll allow it. And so there's a concept that I'll be using in the plot twist where when people say politics is same side of the coin or different side of the same coin, it doesn't matter which way the eagle faces, whether that eagle is facing the left or the right. And we know that because Candace Owens is someone who was expected to be blue ticket Democrat. Her having anything that closely resembles conservative talking points, well, that was the true issue. And if she doesn't create her own space using the modern technologies and her own ability to cultivate social media, well, then politics, how do you ever expect those white men to take her serious? The allies want her to sit her little ass down. And the allies use their platforms to say it with impunity. Almost as if they don't know what she actually said when she went to Congress. And that we're only in the year 2023. Oh, no, we're only in 2022. But a key concept is that people can fly whatever flag they want to fly because they have all of these different meetings. There's different sections, though. The base of the pole of which you stand on, what is your flagpole made of? Is it wood? And then what do you top your flagpole with? In the political space, well, if you have soul, that's eagle. And that's the Great Republic. And proximity to whiteness then is the Roman law, as so defined by those who practiced. English law, as according to what we go by in the American Constitution, well, we still apply a heck of a lot of Greek democratic principles. And the Greek community historically have been white male boy lovers. So the allies who laughed the hardest in the faces of Black women were gay white men. Detach the base and the stem of what somebody stands on, and we would find out whether or not Candace Owens actually is more conservative or democratic. If we only use snippets and sound bites and talking points, we are no better than the mainstream media she said I have to separate myself from by creating her own lane. But we won't know whether she faces the left or the right politically until we slow down and look at what bills she actually brought to the table for discourse. The flag behind her and who invited her to whatever platform and event this is, and using that against her as a reason for her losing her First Amendment rights is something to cry about. And if it was the bitch ass nigga in the room who shed those tears, well, the Great Pyramid talks about Egypt. And it is said in history that Alexander the Greek was the great rapist whose generals were given free rein once they crossed that plate tectonic and those rivers and those bodies of water that separated the Greeks from whatever civilization was there when their armies arrived. And as a lighthouse showing their boats where to navigate towards on their roadmap to sexual conquest, the Ptolemy merged with what dynastic family were there, and in Kemet, as they call it, before Greek or Hellenistic and all of that historical context, when they used those great pyramids as a guide stone, Cleopatra became the legitimate argument for race mixing, and Egypt or Kemet became the great global example of the world under a society where multiple races converged, early civilizations converged. That does not stop us from talking about the Greeks or whatever the Mediterraneans who were appointed or their soldiers who took free rein for rape. Nor does it absolve America from its responsibility to apologize to the Black woman if they so see fit as white men in politics. A prop. The association or guilty by association, meaning wherever she went, whatever stage paid her to speak, and then taking the soundbite snippet from whatever she said at said event because of whatever flag was behind her and using all of that against her. Man, it drives stronger women who were prepared for corporate America and to deal at that grown woman business and discourse level. It drives them towards entrepreneurship. Thus, plot twist. And while that could be the end of that presentation, I thought it was necessary for me to actually share in context, even with what's behind me, that things happen so fast, I'd be behind the times, even trying to keep up as a content creator, because there is no way that even if I disagree with Candace Owens' positions, and even if I'm relegated now in social media to using their intellectual property, their face, their image, and now their personal stuff, like they use personal attacks. They used her grandfather. Well, I'm not down to do that type of research. That's a whole different caliber of nigga. I would have almost conflated that to some white boy shit. Some in the quack it up space call that agent type stuff. In any event, in my own learnings, which is what the plot twist is, I'm exposed and just as naked and as vulnerable as ever. And because of that, sometimes we have to give you what's actually the real content. And so with that shit, it wouldn't be a space that opens up communication or a platform to open up communication if I was remiss to drop the link. Sometimes we got to let people process. And people gonna process in their own way. I can't be super governing of other people's way of processing information. Just like somebody said I was a grifter. I'd be like, nigga, man, what the fuck? Do y'all even know who I am? I don't think a lot of people know. So when they say grifting, it's like, okay, I guess if this is what you're referring to. But if you don't know what my positions are or where I stand, then you don't know the base of the flag. Let alone you probably haven't even asked what is at the top of that flag. but I'm not the RBG flag. I'm not your pride flag. I'm not your House of Kemet flag. I'm not your Pan-African flag. I'm not your Uganda flag. In many cases, I'm still the voice that says this American flag is ours to claim. And the blood of my ancestors, as far as I keep going back, I keep finding soldiers. And just because other niggas may have a problem with that, that's their problem. I have a problem with it. But before we ever get to the Second Amendment right, the First Amendment was already there and being violated in people's faces. And niggas wasn't even able to stop that. They wasn't able to stop somebody from talking shit about them, let alone protect their own right to say it. And so much of that gets lost when people don't do the actual work. I hope the research that I did actually docs and helped showing about the Candace Owens, because I want to be able to move forward from that plot twist where I declare that it's not my role to use these women as this hurts. When my wife saw me creating this content, I was like, babe, this sucks. But the feminine energy or the how they're phrasing it, and I want to use their language, but I don't even watch the women who I did now support financially. I don't even watch their channels as much anymore because of my experience with the plot twist. When it was Moses, what happened? The truth was Moses would be like, damn. Moses is the nigga that cries like, shit, I'm a crier, I'm the baby boy. Niggas know that, which is why even in black media, they have so many pictures of people like Michael Jordan, Tank. They didn't got everybody. When men cry, when black men cry, that is the bad image messing up the black male's image. Hope isn't messing up the black male's image. Not when the program director is an ally. If the agenda is to maintain hope in the black community and to make it a safer space for hope, then of course the heterosexual woman has to now identify as a she, her, hers. And that the heterosexual man, well, that same white privilege analogy, now that goes to the heterosexual black man. And niggas don't know how to deal with that. Just like white allies don't know how to deal with black men who call other black men niggas. Just like men didn't know how to deal with other men who called men bitches or punks. So much about this English language that is just so freaking confusing when what's bad is good and what's right is good, but what's wrong is now the thing that makes you the most money. And if you're standing on what's right, not only are you shadow banned, but you lose all of your rights. And your only alternative is to go. You can try to fight back. All right, so I'll be dropping bombshells, which is why my information takes a little bit longer. It's 53 minutes, 35 seconds. My opinion on the Umar Johnson, I like to call him Omar, not Umar. I really don't see you in it as black women. I believe if there was a role for black women, it's the same thing as investing in the hope or the faith-based community, where you had the dichotomy of Christianity and Islam. And you can be a deaconess and be submissive to the deacon board, but that at least allows you a seat at the table. And if you do have an economic base, you can probably become the wife of a trustee. But the church is still working on whether or not black women who could be the breadwinner in the household can be a trustee in the church, because that's just not a role for you. Just like being the preacher or the evangelizer, well, you can teach Bible study to the children, but being the actual, see, that's where they need me to shut up. And when there's black women who are stuck in that transition from the hope-based institution to one where now they want to access their own skill set. Well, they do have options. Black men say, and this is not all Black men, which is now important to say, not all, but that Black woman should not have a degree because that's student loan debt. And that is baggage that makes her less of a quality human and therefore non-marriage material, according to the men behind me and the faith-based institutions. And when I lie, somebody should drop something in the chat like a F you or a turd. But I feel like if I tell the truth, I should at least get a fire sign because no one's going to listen to my long rants. And no one cares about my opinion in the first place. And being right, well, in social media, that's not what sells. I'll give another example of this very long body bag, a much deserved body bag, because they would say Moses is pandering to women. He's grifted to Black women's empowerment because I'm the one who said sorry to a woman who accused me of something that she said made her feel weird. And her accepting my apology made women feel weird. And I will never understand that a Black man would yell at me for apologizing to the woman. I'm married. Now, I know in my heart that she must be talking about books for Moses. And I know in every bit of data and research that I could find, every receipt, that until somebody else shared the receipt of who that person was and the avatar they were using at that time, I didn't even know who she was. So based off of a voice of association, the assumption was right even at the time. I'm sorry you experienced that. Even if I don't know if I'm wrong or right, I'm sorry she experienced that. Now, as a man, it hurts even worse because I'm married and I have a daughter. That it is an allegation. And though it is one of the corniest allegations, it's not domestic terrorism, and there are other offenses. And there's way worse. I'm sorry I realized that, was my second response. When I thought that I was finna deflect, and that wasn't me. Because even if it was, and now let's get to the point where now I have to deal with the fact of, even though I still feel like it wasn't me, and I know it could be somebody else, that does not stop it from being her who felt like it was me. And for her, she felt like I was somebody that was different than that. So that's the third apology. And then after that, it's like, well, woman, I can't apologize more than that. She confirmed, though, are you apologizing? So the fourth one would be yes. Because as a man, if somebody did that to my wife, I don't care what the joke was. We're not comedians getting paid to make stupid jokes and able to accept the reward when people who claim to be white allies laugh. Just because they thought the most notorious crackhead in the world said something funny didn't make it funny. And just because the man walked up and said, that's my wife, or keep your mouth, or whatever he said about my wife. Because the allies still gave him the award, didn't they? The House of Consciousness still gave Umar Johnson the award, who I say Omar because I don't really see you in it. I just don't. And if that makes me a grifter because I'm somebody who actually listened when these men started talking, my natural was to call these niggas niggas, though, whether you understand it or not. And a white woman can be in media and say nakers. So whether the white woman says nakers, and it still didn't stop me from wanting to say nigga when I deal with niggas like this. But if one of these niggas want to have a conversation with me, well, that's a debate. And so let me go forward, because that's why it'd be so hard to present. It's been 1 hour. This is the plot twist. It is why B1 Brother Moses felt it necessary to have these type of conversations. And so let's keep going. Because at my, look, I would never be able to defend myself for having a $400 fix-it Band-Aid solution for my oral health needs. They're like, Moses, why haven't you got your teeth fixed? And I swear to God, you wouldn't believe that the plot twist was because the woman who I asked, who had the most closest relationship to the person who was even in the dental space, she thought the shit was funny rather than somebody, a real nigga, like, hey, I need to get my teeth fixed. And in social media, the joke was on me for even asking that person. Literally, the plot twist was I became the joke for even thinking to ask. Now, you might not get why that's a psychological or pathological thing that involves people like Cynthia G to come and help Black women understand Black males' pathology, or why the husband and the character traits of trying to be a good husband get Black men labeled as simps. And so apologizing and then saying, you know what, as a man, I shouldn't call women bitches. Why that shit ends up being, nigga, hell no, nigga, what are you talking about? See how far you go with that message. Can't make this shit up. There it is. Can't make this shit up. Hands in the air when you want to say something different and you know what you're going to say is going to be non-PC conforming, hands in the air. I can't make it up. We can't make this up. And PC conforming, even on the job, you can say, you can't make this shit up. And they will accept shit, even knowing you could use the shit emoji and they would laugh. And you just can't make this shit up. I swear to God, they don't fucking hear me no matter how long I talk, no matter what receipts I put on the board. And so I'm going to leave it up here just a little bit longer. And for those who know, now I'm going to take myself off because I don't consider myself a grifter for being a nigga who challenged these niggas. And these niggas pissed me off. So me being mad and then fucking up people's platforms by super chatting when I was mad, saying, I know I am finna disrespect a Black person's platform. This is their business. And I'm the one yelling at them in all caps, but I'm trying to do it in the way that they said. If you disagree, use the super chat. Because if you disagree too much, they'll call you a troll. And in order to start protecting those trolls who disagree with you, sometimes you give your trolls wrenches and make them mods just to protect people's free speech. And yes, we know if Black men and Black women lose their free speech, that is because an entirely different community, which has a different set of guidelines on what their community standards are in a position to subjugate both the Black man and the Black woman. And I thought the Black woman being able to exercise her First Amendment was the great compromise of the 60s. That the jobs and all of this marching and protest and affirmative action was so a more diverse talent can be accepted, not in the federal government creating a bigger state, but that they could be accepted and protected in corporate America or in private business. That's what I thought we were doing. And if it wasn't for women who also believed in education and showed America that it didn't matter what level of degree they attained, they would now use education as a weapon when they so see it. And there's nothing that we can do about it. How do they say it? They say, oh, you're too educated for this role. Or they say, oh, you're articulate. Or when they leave it, they'll just go to their, when you're not at the water cooler, they say they don't like being in the room with her. And if they don't use the word bitch, they'll use a word like she thinks she's smarter than everyone or she knows everyone. But in your face, they'll say she's so articulate and well-spoken, which is why the allies say, well, we brought her to the table because she is well-spoken. And then they are able to cover themselves by saying, but I didn't think she was going to say that. While laughing at the joke being made by the crying ass nigga who turned her into a prop. So now I want to get into the actual plot twist, since all of that information, as we know, is context. That's just the background in the B1 space coming from the tribe of long winds, which is what all of these folks essentially are. From the tribe of long winds who want to use media and have a conversation. And so if I'm the grifter, then let me put these folks on the screen. Who we know love to have this conversation. Now they're giving me some other options. I want to use camera, video file. Let me see. I got to stop. And then if I do it this way. See, all of y'all who know how to do this in real time, or you have somebody who can manage all of this for you, you got black privilege. And now I'm hating on you. And the fact that you got studio equipment, engineers, you got everything. You got speakers, you got a monitor, you got a mouse, you got staff, your payroll, because 97% of the PPP loans went to payroll, but they said black folks was scamming. And that was the thing that they said, black folks don't even need to apply. But they're asking for $1 million and $72,500 was forgiven. For Uber drivers and barbers and shit. You was a $72,000 a year Uber driver? They said no, but I was going to be. They said me and my wife used that car. They claimed that car as a part of their business. And even when they did a separate investigation into the actual fraud claims, it was never as big as they said it was. See, this is what happens. I don't like that. And so I try my hardest to stay on topic, but in any event, from the tribe of long winds, the argument then is on Fox Soul, which isn't Fox for Candace Owens, but it is another voice that would have been brought to the table by said allies, Fox Soul. They bring another voice to the table, Cynthia G, who was instrumental in the Facebook being transitioned into live streams. And while they used to use Google Hangouts, they couldn't because that was personal identifiable information that connected to people's actual email addresses, which connects to people's IPO addresses. In her experience, just like in the experience of people like religious leader, minister, Louis Farrakhan, they can be banned from Facebook when the other communities no longer appreciate their First Amendment right. Despite them being better at omni-channel social media marketing than any of the people they hired. And the very reason their skill set was most important as diverse talent. But because it drove these Black women into a space where they said, well, shit, I could do this myself if I got to take this type of abuse in corporate America. And when that Black woman was thrown under the bus by the soft-ass crybaby nigga, whether he is that or not, and the allies laughed, well, all the quotable moments became headline. Not the talent or the skill set or the entire resume that brought the Black woman to the table in the first place. They say we do too much of the victim narrative. But if the Black woman is able to be censored by Mark Zuckerberg, and Mark Zuckerberg can be called to Congress, and he can essentially tell them to fuck off. But he's the one who has the moderators who get to determine what hate speech sounds like in America. And he's the one who gets to hire the people who listen in and moderate and determine whether or not the community's guidelines are being upheld. And when he appoints the people to listen, well, whether they know what they're listening to or not, or whether they are actual allies, or they think the shit that's being said is funny, well, they're still the ones who have to abide by what the community standards and guidelines state, right? O'Shea Duke Jackson then being on the other end of the coin, whether you say Democratic or Republic, whether you say Greek and we believe in a great democracy where there are judges and we appoint judges, or you believe that judges need to be appointed from the church, or you believe that judges need to happen by tribunal from the tribe, and you believe that there is a such thing as a village. Some people assume that the Nation of Islam had its own system of governance, and I said, these niggas sound stupid. If that makes me a grifter, then they need to listen to the actual plot twist and to the real receipts. But in America, it's not about the robe that the Black man puts on if he's only brought in because they love them a funny nigga. And every once in a while, athletes have to chuck the deuce for mental health, and why they can slander and ridicule athletes. Marijuana as an alternative to fentanyl, for example, would get one athlete shunned, even if her mama died. While in Russia, marijuana in a government regulated and produced through technology and science form in a vape pen will get your ass 9 years incarceration in Russia just because they like sending political statements. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for God put a Black woman as an ally when Fox needed to hear the soul of Black women. But as a Black man, that didn't mean that Tammy Mack became my friend. Tammy Mack has her own agenda. And when she finally says, is there a war against Black men? Tammy Mack, full episode available. That was about the business of being Black, and they missed the whole business. Umar Johnson lost the debate and Black men are still crying. She uses the U, Cynthia G, 40,000 views. And I took the screenshot when it was only 4 days old. It was about 1 hour and it showed what I'm trying to say. But I believe that women have to have that conversation with women when they feel like, a woman isn't being the best ally. But I'm not willing to play the game of who's woker than who and who's acting pro-Blackish. I suck at being a grifter. I am no more woker than the next. And being pro-Black-ish, I have to learn through media. My authentic self, if I'm ever to succeed in any other capacity other than in the street, who I am, well, let me show you them. See, I when it got there, see, that's how you know my PowerPoints are built in and they're interactive and all of that. But I'm going to stop it and then we're going to I have to slow even my own PowerPoint down. Dr. Umar Johnson has an HR 40 response for Cynthia G, but not to the Dwight man, because Black male unity has not solved for the pathology he exhibits daily. I can share that on my post, but now it's time to get into the real information. And being from the tribe of long winds, I thought that when the women have the conversation with women, it was necessary. But when I found out that women are the ones who would throw Cynthia G under the bus, and I did the research, and they were throwing her under the bus at the time when her platform, the base of what she was trying to do in America, was say that America would be better off if they understood Black women's studies. And that's what was actually censored and on the petition by this actual group of people, these real people, personal identifiable information, them and their small businesses, and how they hide underneath the business as protection. And as long as they are not the business is not the person, they as Black men are able to objectify and monetize the intellectual property, the personhood, everything about this woman and her personal information. It will never be protected. And let me get into the why. Now that I gave you a scripture and a little bit of a verse and a song. I just slow myself down, read it out loud just in case we have that community that likes to screenshot. I didn't know that we were playing that game. But if that's the case, then I'm way behind the curve on screenshots and being able to keep up. Because I'm not even interested in this part of the conversation. But I support Cynthia G, hands down, man down. Get your ass knocked out. But that would get me arrested, supporting the actual protest. Because Black men are the counter protesters to Black women's studies, and they hate the fact that Maxine Waters represents California. And they ascribe towards the mentors of Candace Owens, Larry Elder, who takes L after L after L, whether he ascribes to be Democratic or Republican, conservative. And that's her mentor, which is why I would yell at that dude, guy, Larry Elder, for being a loser. Let me run that back. See, the slides would happen too fast if I just let the slides go. And for some reason, I'm trying to use my stuff. It's like, Moses, don't even run it back. Either they caught it or they missed it. You be doing too much. That's why the slides take so long. They saw Maxine Waters. Black Seminole Indians and Native Americans and Cherokee and when Maxine Waters went to Congress and talked about that, and them not being a part of the Dawes rolls, these confused people who don't know the race and identity argument, but they think they can talk about race and how to be a better ally, and they think they know what to listen to. People like Candace Owens who say they know Black history. Because at that point, even if I was going to challenge Candace Owens, it wouldn't be on who she married, though he's a white. It wouldn't be on how her size or if she wears the wig, the size of her nose or her facial features. Rashida Strober said colorism is a thing. I didn't know what that was. She said darkism. And rather than argue who said what first, I just say Rashida Strober because I know who said that. I know who influenced me on who said that, on understanding colorism. Now, proximity to whiteness as a form of mating and dating and all of that, well, that's what the plot twist is for. Why people had alternatives, and why when the target demographic was Black woman, or Black women, excuse me, there's women fighting for that, and there's also men vying for a target demographic of Black women. And the church is no different. Many would argue that the church, or the hope-based institution, which is nonprofit or tax exempt in many cases, that they target Black women as their core audience and demographic. And that's with or without social media or respect to the First Amendment. And I'm arguing that it is that faith-based community that censors the First Amendment right, which causes not just the men, but the women to then want to leave said faith-based or hope-based institution in the first place. And while those women are still emotionally and spiritually susceptible, there are people vying for their attention in media, and media is the tool that propagates certain messages. And the handwriting was on the wall a long time ago. Since I'm dropping receipts, I say Black first. In my era, these were the people who put the message out there first, and that enabled live streaming content for a Fox Soul to ever get live streams. And what we know is that when Cynthia G goes live, or when O'Shea Duke Jackson goes live, they get more live viewers than Fox Soul on YouTube. These are the real facts. They are still learning from O'Shea and Cynthia G. It's not over. They are still learning from Omar Johnson. I like to use the O because I see O'Shea in Umar Johnson. I don't see you in it, Black woman or Black women. And the handwriting was on the wall. If you can see it in the background, he was making his choice. He was already making his choice because he attended HBCU, Howard University, or the educated lame argument, avoiding the Pookies and Ray Rays in his own community, i.e. B1 Brother Moses and my family. But when it becomes an issue of the household or the individual Roman numeral, I, when it's about I now, and the Black woman is at the table, and the Black male is the one making the joke that's very unsensitive, and the allies who claim to be fighting and claim to be putting up big numbers, undefeated, 19-0, like Shakur Stevenson, who I admire as a boxer, young Black male. Nation of Islam. After his biggest championship bout, he got down on one knee in the middle of the ring. He put on a sports clinic athletically. But if you're somebody in the empowerment community that wants to put a real clinic in your community, well, who can have that conversation better than a Black woman? And who can tell you why? And if you're going to be in the empowerment space as supposedly an ally for Black women, well, there's times where you got to know when to say, I'm sorry. And I know that Cynthia G is still going way soft on those who declared her the enemy. Even those who consider themselves allies and fail, like those who think Viola Davis is wrong when she's the woman from South Carolina who went back and bought the plantation that her family owned in South Carolina, while the senator from South Carolina works with people like Lindsey Graham to make it harder for initiatives like Cory Booker out of New Jersey, who talks about Senate Bill 300 land, or reparations for Black men under whatever legislation you put it under. So let alone when the Black woman gets there and she has her own bill to talk about, which is violence, Candace Owens, when Cory Booker comes to talk about land, there's already a Black senator in South Carolina. So when the Black woman steps up and buys it and goes to sway, well, there's so much that you can pull out in any clip. The Woman King is a 2020 American historical epic film about the Agoge, the all-female warrior unit And I can't even read as fast as I put these clips together. So black men are at war was a question that the life of a grandmaster troll, if somebody tells you that their business is being a troll, and that is not just their business, that is their life, I'm for one says just believe them, and at that point, I don't need to listen to what more they have to say. But that didn't stop them from getting 2.6 thousand views for talking about it or using the image, the face, the voice, whether it was in context or not, the property of this woman as property. But she can get fired and censored. Some channels won't be as successful, like Divested Witch, who runs smear campaigns across social media, whether they have the facts or not. Whether they know that when I say I see the O'Shea in Umar, it is because there was a time when even O'Shea tried to bring in the conscious community to talk to his audience, which was the Negro Manosphere, or the other side of the coin. And it didn't matter if these dudes were atheists, i.e., people in transition from the faith or the hope-based community. Oh, Lord, help us, this international conversation, ever go into a space of, well, who did you marry? Or not marriage, who do you even like? Oh, but if you back it up further, and there's a woman who says, before we get to what you like, woman, do you even have standards for yourself? What boundaries are you willing to set? And then we'll talk about your expectations for the human, regardless of their hue, when you want to deal with a man. I don't think that I'm the person to have that conversation, and I knew that going into the gate. I still believe that now. I stand on it not only as the principle, but as something to which I still feel insulted by. Because the expectation is I should be held accountable for who I associate with. So let's dive deeper into the character of O'Shea hosting the panel with the House of Consciousness at the same time while Candace Owens is being called to Congress to speak about violence. Because these are the other men and the alternatives. If the Negro Manosphere is talking to men and the women who are talking to women are getting banned, but the Negro Manosphere are not, here's your plot twist. The one who created the most access, and no matter where they go, the Prince of Pan-African, they have the most access to Black women. Take pictures everywhere. It shows you the Black women claiming to want to be his wife. And I can either tell you that or he can show you that. But it will not correct that being sexual deviancy to me. And while I believe it's sexual deviancy, and while I may be against it, it doesn't make me the best ally. I'm a heterosexual male. I come on with my own agenda as a married man. And as a father, I think that some of those messages aren't what's best for the Black household. They're not what's best if you want to be a successful husband and monogamous. But I'd be canceled by this community in a heartbeat. To answer your question directly, on Fox Soul, when Umar Johnson was brought there, who I like to call Omar, but that's not his name, and Maya Angelou already talked about being called out of our names. Solution: conduct a systems analysis and an institutional assessment. Those are his words, which is why I put them in quotes. But when Sheila Jackson, the representative of the Democratic Party, said that and extended the conversation from the Black men, he would have called that a weak argument. But when he went to Fox Soul, he said, conduct a systems analysis and an institutional assessment, and Black men must unite. That was his primary crux, which is why I put him in an image with O'Shea and the House of Consciousness. If that's his message, why ain't he doing it? Why ain't his school built? That same community talks shit about Q-Butter and the Zayek's institution for saying they wanted to create an online space, and for talking shit because Q-Butter created a school out of his own house that would serve the needs of people in Harlem. But this motherfucker got the award. Excuse me, it's already switched to Sway. So my question at this point is how Sway? How Sway? Because in Holberg or Johannesburg, Sway, they thought he was from South Africa, of course, based on MTV footage. And those are his words, and I can play it, but they might strike me if I play it in his words, or they might be offended by it. But during the interview before the Woman King, this visual means something to some people more than it means to others. On Sway's universe, he gets to talk about whatever he wants, just like Mark Zuckerberg's universe or Facebook or metaverse. He gets to determine who gets to work for his company and who gets paid or not. It's still just First Amendment. And if our federal government can't tell him to shut up, and he's made trillions of dollars off of it, why the hell can't the Black woman tell the Black man who told the stupid joke to shut up without her being fired? Because she's the one who told you that we don't like when people call us out of our names. Did you only read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings and never understand why that was important? Because when niggas start crying about criminal justice reform, niggas are the caged bird. And if you know why that bird is singing, then why the hell aren't you enjoying the music? I don't get fire signs. I don't get chats. I don't get anybody to ever talk back to me, which is how I never call myself the grifter. But people would call me the grifter for when I do interrupt their platforms, because I know I'm going to get kicked off. I at least super chat it. And as worse and as inflammatory as it's going to be, is the bigger the investment. If I say something, oh yeah, it's finna hurt, that's a hundo. I got to keep it all the way a hundo with you. But it's their platform to say what they want. And Fox Soul isn't bigger than O'Shea or Cynthia G. Neither make as much money as Zuckerberg, but it all has to do with First Amendment. Now, politically, the Build Back Better program becomes the Clap Back Better program when you deal with people who don't actually give you the bill for either Candace Owens, which I did in the very beginning, the Senate Bill 300, Cory Booker, the alternative bill, Sheila Jackson, which was the propagation of H.R. 40, House resolution, the Democratic side, because nobody wants the real facts. And H.R. 40 is the bill that happened to come from the man who Sheila Jackson then kept saying, well, we need this. But Omar Johnson would say, oh, no, don't listen to that. We don't need another study. While given the platform would go up and say, no, we need to conduct a study. And me super chatting him on his live stream, they would say, no, you were a supporter. Because I remember the super chat. He says communities are made up of institutions or the lack thereof and are governed by systems. Let us be very clear about something. This fratricide, this black on black crime that so many of our brothers are engaging in, let us remember. Irish did the same thing. Italians did the same thing. European Jews did the same thing. And my question was, when a black woman accused me, or who she thought was me as a person, why wasn't that an apology, an apology, apology? Why does he get to, in his own mind, get to keep blaming these Irish and Italians in the system? He goes on to say, and in the 30s, the 40s, the government decided to upgrade them to white status, and in doing so gave Italians control. Italy is in the Mediterranean. So to me, this is telling me this is somebody else who uses the Great Pyramids as a lighthouse or as a guiding stone, not the Mississippi guide stones, not the Georgia milestones, nothing like that. Whether you get it right or whether you get it wrong, I don't think he knows what he's talking about. He says, with that being said, I'm not waiting on the government to solve the problems of Black men. We as Black men have to unite, come together, organize, and solve our own problems. And here's mine. On the right side, just because we can admit that I don't got enough time to go through these slides as I created them. I was supposed to be able to give you that information in real quick, real fast, talking point, and be done with it. But not only have I told you my position and why I disagree, I've given you the actual political bills. And people can do with those what they want. But the Supreme Court justice the woman took her L. Those who claim to be allies, I don't think they ever will have to take their L. But the apology was from the Black man who thought he was funny. And so I issued mine. Here's what happened. Because even during the plot twist, the monarchy from Egypt and Cleopatra, or dating, or all of that, is correlated to the monarchy from Great Britain. It's still the monarchy. English is the language, and what do they do with who's going to have a sense of government? Democracy, or the Greek derivative thereof, as they learned from the writing on the wall about media. Look, I could keep going down history, or I can keep it today. Today, I tried to share in my context, even using the tools and resources available today, that there are music videos where drawing themselves in this fierce character with an afro and samurai swords as a Black woman, well, this afro is not accepted. This is the plot twist that got shut down when I actually streamed the music videos and those things. And it shows that YouTube has a way of censoring information. And when they think that the information needs to be censored, they cut off that stream completely. And there were times when I was sharing information where they only bleeped out and they put a message over it where I was sharing information. But most of the time, YouTube will allow you to share other people's information, even when it's their personal, identifiable information, and whether they are content creators or not. And when it's the Black woman, I say, well, that's the reason for the castle doctrine. Let them talk that shit all they want. But the Black man needs to handle Second Amendment. Once talking about it is no longer acceptable, then it is the Second Amendment. But the royal family of Black YouTube exposed the tenets of SYSBM. Y'all weren't ready for the trans or the hope or the transition as y'all thought y'all were. They weren't ready for a peaceful transition of power from a woman back to a king. And they're definitely not ready to talk to me or to really talk about a woman king. And when it comes to business and media, well, Viola Davis would have been the one who did the gender war best, because not only did she go back and buy the land, she's also the one who's responsible for putting out these movies that even come anywhere close to women fighting back in media. And we already know about shadow banning. And we know about censoring when it's the black man trying to do it, because black men have every right to put on their own dress, like Omar Johnson. They can join the choir and sing in that choir about what they assume to be white Jesus, because media did a hell of a job, and the American Baptist Society and the American Colonial Society and the Missionary Society have done a great job indoctrinating men with the King James book of the Bible. And to be a steward of land, they did a good job of restricting men, as long as we only give the money to the funny niggas. Because if you give a man an opportunity, well, a man does know when to say sorry. But there's other men who would say, well, the program director for Fox Soul owes them an apology. And that's the motto of masculinity in America that has come to be accepted. A man crying because he feels like he insulted a woman, even if he feels like he didn't, but in the very moment on the spot, no excuses made. No. Hope is what gets you kicked off of Black YouTube or canceled in America. Because hope is the trans argument, or those who are not men and not even claiming to represent men anymore. And if you disrespect hope, well, damn it, you're disrespecting what keeps people sane. And when people are making their transition spiritually and they're being targeted by media, well, that's the battle of the sexes, whether you're ready for it or not. Ava DuVernay can produce a film about a grown Black adult, Chicken George, being in an ancestral relationship with a little white girl, and that does numbers. Tyler Perry can put on a dress. Umar Johnson can put on a dress. But if I'm not being the best ally, that's something for me to address as a Black man. I attended Morehouse College. The population was like 40%. I had to be an ally. Heterosexual men had a responsibility to the global community that if we were ever to be successful at any other level besides the street, well, we had to get better at being allies. Now, these other groups, they don't claim to be advocates for allies, but the House of Consciousness is polyamorous relationships, where everybody wants to be like David or Solomon and have multiple wives that submit to them, or at least shut the hell up when they say shut the hell up. Passport bros, they advocate for traveling to spaces where the age of consent by law, and those spaces are dominated by Black men, so there's nothing else we can say but don't romanticize Africa. It's not a safe space. Black in America, we have a claim to our own legacy. We have a claim to our own real family. And these are real people, and we have a claim to our personal friendships. Mark Zuckerberg makes us opt out. The federal government makes you opt out if you want to be a part of the modern technology or technological era, just like in the industrial era or revolution. But your right to free speech, if you want to use his platform, the federal government is not willing to regulate interstate commerce like that. They are protective. And we learn that, but yet we have niggas who keep saying we want to conduct a systems analysis and an institutional assessment while they argue against HR 40. He says, but the government intervened, but I'm not waiting on the government. The reason black male pathology is still going on 30, 40, 50 years later is there have been no resolution. There have been no solutions. Nigga, what's wrong with niggas is what Cynthia G says. So if you're just going to then co-opt what she's saying, and you're not going to be a unified force with them, but they're giving you all the awards, but you're the one who hasn't built a school, and they're dissing and dismissing the person who opened up his school in Harlem, while y'all praise Marcus Garvey, who America locked up in Atlanta, and y'all call my alumnus, Martin Luther King Jr., to sell out. Man, fuck y'all. And you can slow that shit all the way down. But we're not the same. African American allows for other people to co-opt the Black experience and then get access to opportunities that even if the woman was not an ally to calling the police, it wouldn't stop her from being treated like a sex worker in corporate America if those who are the allies, or supposed to be allies, are the ones who are laughing at the joke. And black men are the ones who are telling the joke. Chris Rock, the international crackhead, got slapped for it. And the husband still got his Grammy that very night. And Jeffrey Dahmer, well, the LGBT community said, don't make him a part of us. Take him out of our algorithm. But it is completely okay that he was eating niggas. Just don't say niggas. And stop calling black women bitches. Like, it was never so transparent that we had to say that the issue was the nigga in the room who made the joke about the black woman, and that reparations then would be the company actually apologizing. But to take it the next level, now we have to start talking about justice. And if they're a company that respects diversity and inclusion, do they now punish the black man for his joke? Do they punish the allies? But we all know the white men are still going to be the ones making the decision. And whether you're LGBTQ white man, LGBTQ black woman, supporter, ally, once they get the role, well, plot twist, it doesn't always work out. And even black women have to decide who they have in their circles, because not just what you say can be used against you, but it makes black women now also a part of the guilty by association. Black men in the streets hustling, criminalization on black men, one thing. Guilty by association, one thing. But now, because they laughed at the joke, all of the supposed allies, what they took away from that and what they discussed at their water cooler, no matter where that water came from, Flint, Michigan, well, when they get to the water cooler, all women are now a bitch or a hoe because of the joke? No, not all women. Because in their minds, they are still associating it with who he made the joke about. And I would have called that black man in that meeting the bitch in the backyard or at the family reunion. There's so many other things that we could call him, but unless you've read Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, then you don't know why it was offensive for white people to change her name from Marguerite to I'm just gonna call you Mary. And you definitely wouldn't understand why Mexican not being a race. And then we like, well, that's just a Maria with a taco. Why niggas thought that was funny. But it could be so true that the name Maria, it wouldn't mean anything if you just Google Maria. But your personal identifiable information, that does mean something. The trifecta for Black women empowerment was using what used to be conversations on Facebook or raising awareness, but leveling that up by providing resources. And the concern was, well, if they don't toe the line, then they won't be able to enable donations. Knowing the whole time that, well, they were shadow banning you in the first place, I asked myself, out of any of these colors that you see on the screen, were there any of these areas that you can relate to when it came to mental health? The loss of a parent, the loss of a child, the loss of a sibling, loss of a friend or relative, the loss of a spouse, the loss of a military or first responder. Was it your own personal struggles, or are you someone who just supports someone who has attempted suicide? Because Suicide Awareness Month or Suicide Prevention Month are two different levels of advocacy. And when we talk about the data, who's single with kids and what color they are and where they're at, it wouldn't matter if I explained this detail for detail, bar for bar, number for number. I've come to find out that even when people are this smart, they really aren't this smart. And when Black women are this smart, it's used as a weapon. And when that weapon has foresight to say, well, when it comes to sex workers, it's not that she is a grown sex worker, because you can make that comparison used against any Black woman every time they say ho. Like saying Hoberg to somebody else could be taken out of context when Sway is saying that about Sway's universe, he's on the radio. But in taking Facebook into YouTube, Black YouTube has its own space. And the issue is there are a lot of people who don't give credit where it's due. And when we talk about taking the actual blows, well, they were the ones who had their channels taken down like they were Minister Farrakhan himself. And when we tell you it's about language, they treated these women as if they were the ones making hate speech content, while those who were planning on running over protesters and were a part of the police force or veterans of the police force, well, they're free to do it. So again, remember who were the women protesting, and remember who was actually the counter protesters, and remember what their message was that they were trying to get out when the counter protesters started. And then make your decision on whose side you're on when you get in your vehicle and start talking about committing vehicular manslaughter. Some people aren't able to be allies because they are actual enemies of both the state and of the people within that state. And they are selective with who they feel most comfortable around. And when they are no longer in a protected space and there are other diverse opinions around, who has the ability to take someone's First Amendment right is the same person who has the ability to make the Second Amendment right punishable by law. I'll tell you, in my neighborhood, the gun and drug zone free sign did absolutely nothing to deter crime in my neighborhood. But white people pat themselves on the back and call that being a good ally, as if the middle class, working class, Black family, whether they were together in that household or still in that same community, but not in the same household, as if they weren't the actual topic. And so when Candace Owens went to the Senate floor to talk about violence, remember, that is because there were men who saw the writing on the wall, and they did to decide to talk about everything else. When they started talking and organizing and structuring what YouTube should look like as media, and they started aligning themselves with different messages and understanding what ground they stand on, they created their tenets and published those tenets. They were the ones who said average size 6. When we were supposed to say, hey, this is getting borderline X-rated content here. This is starting to take a step towards, you know, they used to censor it based off of adult content. And if you're going to be making cartoons, you also shouldn't, man, that conversation starts getting lost when the adult behavior is now in the cartoons, and when the cartoon is what's expected rather than the men. So Cynthia G got banned, but men were allowed to continue talking online about their old glory days, and we know what the old glory days means in this conversation if we're talking about the sexual market value. We just didn't know that that was O'Shea Duke Jackson, or they say black men don't hold each other accountable because black men will know exactly who it is, and they will cape for that nigga by not saying, this is the dude who's doing that. And the hate speech against black women is disseminating from this manosphere or nexus. Why they don't consider themselves an agency? As a black man who came up in Northern California, we understand being guilty by association. We disagree. But when it comes to criminal justice and criminal justice reform, the black man has never been able to articulate anything and get it written down that has stopped the, what's little homie name? Stephon Clark from getting killed in his grandmother's backyard by police. And while the police can write that down, and while some people would say, was that a lynching? And others would say, is that an indicator of domestic terrorism? Candace Owens was asking, well, where's the report? And this is not 2023, it's 2022. And they've already gotten millions and millions of dollars allocated towards it. It didn't matter if there was a political bill that she used or the fact that she was able to link it to the fact that they got paid. It didn't matter if it was Maxine Waters or the president of the Congressional Black Caucus, who's right up the street from her. Just like it didn't matter if it was in not Southern California, but Northern California with Kamala Harris going up against the Marxist and socialist agenda. That is and continues to be the Black Panther socialist. Nationalism and socialism, or Nazi, when they start taking black women and putting Adolf Hitler's mustache and face and all the likeness of Adolf Hitler on the black woman's face, and they can make money off that, I'd be like, man, what is wrong with these men? Why wouldn't I call them males? And damn it, why am I wrong for calling these niggas bitches? I put the punk in front of it. I said punk bitch. In fact, I put more than that on there. I said this is a punk bitch motherfucker hoe that we're talking about. And the reason why I can't say that is because it's not being a good ally. Some people would have said, why do we need to be an ally to the rapists? Why would we need to be the ones accepting the Hittites or whatever name or category you put on them? If their name is Marguerite, why didn't you just call her Marguerite? No, they wanted to be called Mediterraneans, or they wanted to be called Grecians, they wanted to be called Babylonians, they wanted to be called Armenians, they wanted to be called Turkish, not even Turks. They wanted to be called Turkish. And there are so many ways that they were able to protect Turk to where they are homogenous for the most part, until you get outside of that and they have to accept, well, there's race mixing that happens with people who may not have been geographically restricted to the origin of the first Turk. So why does Omar Johnson want us to be restricted back to the transatlantic slave trade if he's not ready to talk about trans? Why would he accept an invite to go to the LGBTQ ally space if asking about what does the P mean is what gets you censored? Because today people don't know whether the P means pedophilia, prostitution, pornography, or propagation. For all we know, it can mean profit or profiteering. There's other P words. It hurts that they thought that the P meant plot twist. And as this hurt, because even though I'm only using one image, when you create this in PowerPoint, today's technology can give some better presentation style uses of other people's images. And even PowerPoint says, well, you're supposed to respect other people's property. But making that a part, making it a, what do you call it? That's like a barcode or a scanner, putting a label on something. That didn't actually serve as protection, putting a sign up. Her having a trademark isn't the same as protection. Her having access is not the same as protection. I be hoping people understand it. So now I'm really, really slowing it down. B1 Network unlocked content. No matter how many plot twists I do, I can just change the Roman numerals. V is for victory. What should have been a victory for a Black woman to be able to create her own entrepreneurial endeavors, because had she continued in a space working for a company, she would have been the liability of the person getting sued by that company. She wouldn't have been able to claim protected status. There was no on-bud button when the people who claimed to be allies were laughing at the joke. Omar Johnson, I'll say it again. There was no on-buds button when the people who claimed to be allies were laughing at the joke. And making Candace Owens the joke, well, that just doesn't cut it. Making Kanye West a prop as a Black man, I find not only humor in that, but I find that to be something that, well, if you challenge me on that, then I'll stand on it. But when people say, well, why are you even arguing with a woman? My first thought is patriarchal. I accept it like, oh yeah, I shouldn't be arguing with a woman, rather than saying because she's winning the debate. Why are you arguing with that woman? Well, if you didn't say that, and you had to say something. because there are some Black women who will body you, and they are going absolute easy. Now, while it's okay for Black men to share Instagram and TikTok videos of kids that would have disappeared in an hour, but Black men in the Manosphere can share that and hold records of that forever. And parents can say, kids, please don't share it. Parents don't have the ability to stop our kids from sharing that shit, nor do we have the ability to stop these predators from recording it. But in the Manosphere, they get all green light to record our children, and they won't tell us when our children will be recorded. They'll just shut us up. They'll censor us like we're creating hate speech while the predators are targeting American children. Fuck you. They want to fuck American children, but I get fired if I say fuck them. And they'll slow it down to say, oh no, he did say fuck them. He did say fuck them. He said fuck them right there. He used the words. But they won't use the word rape. And so when you say sexual harassment, we can't get diversity and inclusion to understand sexual harassment still gets cape and cover. Saying sexual harassment, you still got to overcome the stigma that's applied to the Black woman of bitch and dog and property and shut the hell up before you can ever get to the argument about the trans community, because that's just hope. Transatlantic. But in Atlanta, that's the only other place where you can say they have media incentives that are so good, they make a man put on a dress like he's in Hollywood, treating Atlanta like it's Holly weird, just like San Francisco. And while 40% is the number that means something, the majority weren't. And on the Manosphere, they asked me the question like I was supposed to defend it. I said, man, y'all got to check with Morehouse's policy. But while I was there, the trans agenda was not my concern. As a heterosexual male, me speaking out against that is something that gets me flagged. I don't speak out anyway. In fact, I shut up and want to listen. Because somebody like me, I get my interactions wrong as a heterosexual male with my own wife, let alone to let some bitch ass nigga disrespect another woman in the room. Plot twist, the disrespectful bitch ass nigga that thought he was funny was me. And whether it had anything to do with the gay America agenda or not, the heterosexual Black man was the one who was failing. Why does @FoxSoul allow Cynthia G to insult Black men? Well, because that's First Amendment. And when you say allow, that speaks towards a power dynamic where so many people have to just admit that your freedom of speech can be turned on and off as if you are Minister Farrakhan himself. And it didn't matter if you actually were the person who they were calling a trans. In their community, they said Cynthia G looked trans. Umar Johnson is the one who said, I need an apology from the program director for not disclosing the medical information of Hope, who was identified as a Black male, but with makeup and money and surgery is the word I was looking for. They would put the clown face and the tears on Cynthia G and get 136,000 views dogging the Black woman who they called a trans, while the person who says we need another study, man, you will never be able to make sense of it all of the backflips and triple gainers. And so I hope these receipts in slow motion help. But when I say the PPP loan, there are a lot of bartenders who at some point, they know they should have been independent contractors and they're selling their services and their skill sets way too short, just like the waiters and the waitresses. registered nurses, essential worker, judicial worker, essential worker. But those Uber drivers, they were asking for $100,000 PPP loans. Were Black people? And when it comes to the actual data on who was switching jobs, those chauffeurs or those butlers, those driving Miss Daisy ass Uber lifts, well, that was a $100,000 claim that the system then investigated and said, no, that's not fraud. You can make $100,000 driving Uber. And those same homes that were worth like 75, 150, $200,000 in Del Paso Heights. Well, I would challenge somebody else to use Zillow and start looking at the property values in California now. Because O'Shea said, I'm running to Africa. So at the time of his decision, look at the home values, and he was bringing on a woman to have conversations about real estate. So look at the difference in the home values then and today for California property. And then that's how you start to bring back in the real argument. It's not personal or a personal attack. It's showing you. This is Mammy Mountain, social and economic mobility infographic, not blackdemographics.com. But it's going to be up to other people if they like it or not. As a part of my mental health, it took a lot to be able to make that visual representation. It means something to some people. It doesn't to others. The colors in blue meant something to somebody. The colors in pink meant something. I hate that I got to be that corny, but I suck at marketing, which is why I don't like doing marketing. They'll say the Black man doesn't have as good of a channel because he sucks at social media marketing. So what's their excuse when Tasha K or Cynthia G or Nyla Says gets that phone call? Because we know they ain't doing shit when Candace Owens gets the phone call. And when Umar Johnson gets the phone call, well, essentially all he did was say the same thing that Sheila Jackson said. And if Sheila Jackson is going to say it, then 50 Cent Curtis Jackson might have said it. And if we're all talking about what a dead person said, then we might as well let Michael Jackson say it in his own words, since all of these are famous Jacksons. Or hell, Deion Sanders can say it, since he's taken his own money and invested in an HBCU's football program at Jackson State. But I don't know what the P means. I just know that it shouldn't mean pussy. Coming out of my mouth, it was one of the most disrespectful statements that I could have made. And even though I was using it from a term of, like, not a term of endearment, I don't like them niggas like that. Like, that's how bad, like, it was. But that didn't mean that my ignorance is justified. But when I said that shit, what hurts is that nigga, I knew I meant that shit. I was like, no, this nigga is I was meaning it in the form of like cowardice. Like, you can't even make this level of cowardice up. This level of cowardice has to be genetic. Like, they grandfathers have to be cowards. But looking back in my repertoire, motherfuckers either joined the military or they became preachers. No plot twist there. Is moving out of the United States the best idea for Black men? That was only 9.3 thousand when they were making that a conversation piece 4 years ago. Passport bros today, well, that's a different topic, right? Do Black men hold Black men accountable? I'm gonna do the shit. You see it on your screen. Niggas like, no, this is some real bitch ass shit, nigga. This is essentially snitching. Y'all motherfuckers don't know what y'all talking about. The problem is it never gets to the actual business model. And so even if I share you the receipts of what the business model actually is or what was intended to be, that business model isn't what's replicated. Only the fact that they didn't know how to hold accountable the bitch ass nigga who in all intents and purposes, if we use the old definition, that was a real bitch ass nigga, man, that we was dealing with. These was the dudes who said they were exposing corruption by painting evil on the black woman. They made the website called Slaying Evil. That on March 8th, 2021, they then came back and changed the website, which is the receipt that I showed you. That they're the ones who went down all the way through their numbers. So me showing you what Candace Owens brought to the table at the Senate meeting for Congress when talking about domestic terrorism as it relates to, by definition, online and social media. But they don't think that these are receipts because I don't drop receipts, I drop facts. Essence Magazine is just media. Chicago Tribune, just media. When big tech will pay online small businesses, this was published September 9th, 2022. I would conflate that to being reparations. They got called to task. It's the same fucking thing to me, except they used the other word. And they know what words to use when the words apply. Niggas don't when they're applying English and Roman law, which was okay as long as you say, oh no, I sympathize with niggas because of ebonics. But I don't got time to be taking those positions when the proposed big tech reparations that did stall would not include the same black women who actually experienced this. But we can't talk about Chicago Tribune because when Chicago puts out a sex trafficking SWAT raid against human traffickers, when Chicago Tribune puts out that they caught a sex trafficker, and we say, look, Chicago Tribune caught that nigga, that wasn't us. We didn't tell the police to go do a fucking human trafficking raid and get that bitch ass nigga Ramil. They did that. That's the government. They say, well, nigga, you're a traitor for loving the government or forever serving your country. You're the traitor because you went to school. You're an educated Pookie and a lame because you don't talk about this. I'm not in politics. I just said husband. And it hurts to do this content when if you even put in the search algorithm for it, do you know what the protection of children looks like when you put that algorithm in and now you're seeing story after story after story of unprotected children? And the women who have that conversation I've had to watch as each one up, whether they had a husband or were single or married white or dated white, it doesn't fucking matter. The people who are supposed to be allies, well, they're not willing to do the mandatory training when the police are supposed to do the training. They'll bring in a company to do the training, and what you'll find out is that the information being provided by the people doing the training is insufficient, i.e., America deals with the Israeli military for training the American police. But I'm not supposed to say that. Just like the plot twist is, we're not supposed to talk about Chicago going after human trafficking. And when they do get it right, we're not supposed to say, damn, they actually did start running a sweep and they caught a nigga who said he wasn't trafficking children, but come to find out, yes, he was. That black man can go to jail, do his time, and join the Nation of Islam, and they are not going to protect him if he does some repeat offender shit. Why would black women then protect that nigga? I believe in criminal justice reform as much as anybody can believe in criminal justice reform. But damn it, at the very least, some of this is supposed to piss me off, y'all. And if I can't call that man a bitch ass nigga because of the word bitch, then I might as well not even say bitch no more. So what happened was I thought Clarence Thomas was the representation of the Black conservative in America because he made it to the Supreme Court. But even being on the Supreme Court as a Supreme Court justice, we look at him, and in the early 90s, he had the opportunity to be appointed as the Supreme Court Chief Justice. They chose otherwise. It didn't matter that Clarence Thomas married that white woman. Now that I have to call white allies who fail by what they want to be called women, call her a woman. December 23rd, 2019, one of the other people in that space, just like people thought Judge Joe Brown was the guy, Judge Mathis used to annihilate Judge Joe Brown in the numbers. And Judge Joe Brown was not able to get his message to resonate. Just like Shahrazad Ali was not able to get their message to resonate with women who were in their transition away from hope and into business. And into business meant that they were either going to have to be their own entrepreneurs, or they were going to have to go to the private sector, or Black men said they were traitors, but they could go to the government. I didn't think nothing was wrong with it. The government was hiring like a mug, a good state job, benefits, work-life balance. Ain't nobody even telling you what they actually do, that's another topic. But if you're arguing against a bigger government, then you're also arguing for more firing from the federal government, which would be those same jobs. Who gets fired? Well, according to the allies, if they got to start firing people, last hired, first fired, that would be the Black woman. Not the Black man. And I used to tell these people to change their avatar because they didn't know that they were advertising to kids using cartoons. And there was nothing that I can say to these people to get them to change their avatars. They still don't get that using cartoon characters is the #1 highest grossing way of advertising to kids. But they're putting adult behaviors onto kids. That's the issue. Ava DuVernay can produce whatever film she wants. And when she chooses to cast the characters of what looks like a child and then give that child an age, just because they say 1812 doesn't mean that my understanding or my children's know 1812. All I see is an adult Black man over 6 foot tall and what looks like a little white girl. And while it might be okay for Ava DuVernay to be that kind of an ally, those type of allies laughing or welcoming and accepting, those who believe in a marriage between a man and a woman, well, we got some learning to do. The only way we learn is if those folks who are the most offended have a space to have the conversation. It sucks that they have to be bold enough to be open to have the conversation. But when they finally are, it shouldn't be because there was no way they could have the conversation, that they only had Black men spaces to go to, or they only had Clear Channel. If they wanted it, they had to have the conversation on the radio. Because if they decided to do it on Facebook or any of those platforms, they no longer owned the right to their own story. That Black experience, that's what African American means to me. It's the ability to make the Black experience everyone. Well, we've all had a Black experience. And so when Omar Johnson deflects to the Italians and all of those others, to me, he's saying they had a Black experience, but instead of a Black outcome, they got a white outcome. But it doesn't answer the question. And when our families are the ones that are being doxxed, and we're the ones who don't have either a First or a Second Amendment right to protect our own families, our image, what we say, even before what we do. Well, we do need a better representation. Black men say sorry. And I put the link in the chat. So let me go back and check and see if there's anybody who disagrees with me on that. If you want to be in a married and committed monogamous relationship and you want that relationship to be successful, you learn to say sorry. Who want to debate? I'm going to stop the screen share and I want to take this clown ass shit off my background. It's been 2 hours and 25 minutes. If at this point there was no other fire signs, no other nothing else, then that's just me. That's all I got. That's all I get. And so what else needs to be said? I don't have a voice. My voice is hoarse, but that still won't keep me from talking. Silence or people wanting the Black woman to just shut the fuck up some goddamn time is not going to stop the Black woman from speaking. And even though the white woman, Jane Elliott, Kanye West's statement, even though the white woman is teaching white women to be a better ally, doesn't mean that that's going to be effective at white men getting out of the way when the woman king is now speaking. The woman should not have to be the woman king. The role of queen should mean something. But as long as Umar Johnson can say, no, I need 9 queens, and there are 9 women willing to use that title queen the way he wants them to use it, and as long as the nigga's dead, gone, and it didn't kill him, but Kevin Samuels, the rate yourself, and women who want to be queens are calling in to rate themselves to what has been proven to be a low-value LGBTQ ally. Not a high value, but a low value LGBTQ ally. But women would still call in and rate themselves. Okay, then that's what they choose to be queen. I say all of that and more are the reason why Cynthia G wins the debate. Now, who's going to argue with any of the receipts that I've dropped? My position, however many times I said it over and over again, is they drink some water. It's been this way for like a week and a half. When the seasons change, like, I don't know what it is. Like, for some people, it's the sinuses and allergies. But others, when my body starts fighting back, it's creating the fight back cells from my throat, which then now all of that is straining, even though I'm not talking and I'm not yelling consistently. But I don't like these dudes. They weren't supposed to like me. We're not supposed to get along. And when we're in the same spaces, we need the First Amendment or there will never be unity. Because if it wasn't for the First Amendment, 9 times out of 10, it's either going to come to fights. But niggas ain't fighting no more. On the opposite end of that, you got people giving each other awards for not doing nothing. Either way, the shit don't apply to me. I'm not your fucking grifter. I don't like none of these niggas. Me and my wife are still trying to carve our own lane. I met my wife at work. Our first date was to the check cashing place, and then we went to the gun range. Oh, but I forgot. I never said where we met at and what we were doing while we were working. We met at Child Abuse Prevention Council, and that's all I got. I'm B1 Brother Moses. Y'all can't tell a square from Delaware. Y'all can't vet black men. There's no vetting black men. Get over it. Get over yourself. Even Umar Johnson said, well, we need a study. And then he says, well, black men got to come together and we're not waiting on the government. Man, that's the reason why your school ain't built and why you still feel like the problem is Zayek's Institute, which opened up his own home. But that's the problem. Online education is the problem. But you can't fix HVAC. Just like this dude couldn't buy a van. This dude didn't want to pay his child support. And then the other dude ran to Africa. I'm B1 Brother Moses, and I said I'm here in the United States, but I'm a veteran, and I attended Morehouse and got my degree in less than 4 years as a transfer student. But I'm the problem. The fact that the women came on and attacked me not the one who I apologized to. But when I actually said, bitch, I thought I was in the right, which only showed me that I was even more so lost than ever. Somebody said, we just got done going in on you and the toothless crew. So let me show you that. Because I swear to God, what I asked for was, hey, I need help with this. They told me that it's like $20,000 people are spending. They said $30,000 depending on what the treatment plan looks like. When I finally had to talk to white women, because the black women who were office managers and they were in the dental space, they were like, no, they'll laugh at your ass. And so the teeth don't get fixed and you get a Band-Aid solution. And that's what's funny. Not the fact that, well, I bet you didn't go and look at the property value in California and compare it 5 years ago to today either, did you? I bet you didn't look at the property value for the nigga who ran, but then opened up a platform to talk about real estate and allowed a woman to talk about it. And then opened up a platform talking about dating and bringing in dating strategy coaches and life coaches. Because even when that man, O'Shea, found out that they didn't want women, they wanted girls, he was like, fuck it, man, I might as well stay in Africa. That's 2.5 hours. I don't have the voice to keep this up. I don't have the will. As you see, my energy is drained. And regardless of what I say, look at the screen. We'll get to the next plot twist when we get to the next plot twist. I am B1 Brother Moses. That's all I got, a big old Bentley B. Big old Bentley B. And if it wasn't for alternatives, I would have been that blood in the community. There was nothing stopping me and no other jobs. And when we found out that jobs would be the thing, well, that's all I got. And I'm out.